That's interesting. So I'm reversed.
Yeah, you're
Okay. That's disorienting. Go ahead. Sorry. Oh,
welcome.
right. My door's over there. All right. Got it.
Everything's on the other side.
Yeah.
And I suppose for our viewers, if you listen long enough, we could be on the other side of something at the other end of this. So again, welcome everybody to another essential conversation here at Wellbeings. I am so honored and pleased and humbled to have Dr. John McNeel here with me today. He's a practicing licensed psychologist from Los Angeles. And we're going to talk about male type A behavior and what it is, how John got on this subject and has spent a massive part of his life developing and helping people move through this set of behaviors and modifications of the personality to another more optimum place of being. And we're going to talk about what it is and the journey towards getting relief from some of the symptoms of it. But before I start, I want to and again, I would like to really recommend this book, Aspiring to Kindness. And you can contact John in the link below, or Google it. You can get onto John's website. But I want to, this is why this passage made me want to, this small little paragraph made me want to do this podcast. Because whether you're a therapist watching or whether you're everyday working people, there's something about this knowledge is invaluable. It's so important that we can access this and understand it. So let me share with you what moved me into creating this podcast today. The fundamental sickness of a type A subject consists of a peculiar failure to perceive, or perhaps worse, to accept the simple fact that man's time can be exhausted by his activities. As a consequence, he never ceases trying to stuff more and more events in his constantly shrinking reserves of time. It is the type A man's ceaseless striving, his everlasting struggle with time, that we believe is so very frequently leads to his demise from heart disease. Now, my history before I became a therapist was I was a naturopath. And I became a therapist because of being a naturopath, of realizing a lot of what I was doing was sometimes symptomatic treatment of illness, and that the real depth of the causation of the illness was the emotional and relational landscape. So if you're interested in wanting to improve your health and improve your relationships, please go and get a cup of tea. Take a seat, and we're going to talk about male type A behavior. John, welcome. Thank you for being here today.
I'm delighted.
Wow, and I'm curious about, in your life, and I suppose, when was the moment that you started to really get your teeth sunk into this idea of type A behavior and really started to understand what it meant, and whether from your own personal experience of type A, which I've had to struggle with myself and still work on. So what was it that, what was the events that led up to you understanding what this type A behavior was and how you started to recognize it in yourself or in your clients?
Well, answer that question quite easy. I read Dr. Friedman, his first book, also with a fellow named Ray Roseman, but Dr. Friedman wrote 98% of the book. But this was the first time that this is the first book on type A behavior, 1974. It caused quite a firestorm, because it's the first time in medical literature, and this is medical literature, that the claim was made and shown to be true through research, that disease is connected to one's emotions. And so that caused quite a stir. It introduced the phrase type A behavior into the lexicon. Now, loads of people use the term type A, or if someone uses it, they're familiar with it. Today, almost no one knows who coined that phrase. And the phrase came about because Dr. Friedman had this suspicion that there was a relationship between stress and physical health or physical disease. And he kept sending in really good proposals for research, and they kept getting turned down. And he asked a friend of his, he said, why do these good proposals get turned down? His friend said, well, because you keep using the word stress in the title. He said, stress belongs to the psychiatrist. So when your proposal comes in, it goes to the psychiatrist, and the psychiatrists are not going to give all this money to a cardiologist. Dr. Friedman's a cardiologist. No. So he said, call it something else. Call it a syndrome. Call it type A behavior. Bingo. And after that, his proposals got accepted. And the word type A became part of the English language and throughout the world, I reckon. I read that first book with great interest. I went, oh my God, that's me. And his second book came out, which is the same title. It's same title, except it has treating type A behavior in your heart in it. And I also read that book and thought again, oh my God, that's me. And I thought to myself, I would love to meet that man. He was only 35 miles away in San Francisco, but I was very busy. I just didn't have time in my schedule to call someone. And besides, he was a busy scientist. He probably wouldn't have time. Then I got a letter in the mail from Dr. Friedman, not to all the psychologists in the Bay Area. And he was soliciting for group leaders because he was doing a big piece, a huge research project, and he needed about 20 or so group leaders. Well, I got that letter. I wrote back immediately, sent him my resume. And the next day he called me. The moment he got my resume, he called me. And we had a brief interview. The first question that he asked me was, Dr. McNeel, after we said hello, he said, Dr. McNeel, what do you read? If my answer is, well, I'm really too busy to read. I used to read when I was in college, but I don't read any longer. He would have said, Dr. McNeel, it's very nice to talk to you. Thank you for your time. Goodbye. Fortunately, I answered that question not correctly, but to his satisfaction, because I read widely. And he didn't think that group leaders could be good group leaders if they didn't read widely. So that satisfied him. And we had a pleasant conversation for a few more minutes. And he said, Dr. McNeel, I want you to come interview with me at my institute. I said, Dr. Friedman, when I get time, when I get a break in my busy schedule, I'll call you. He said, I hope you have time soon. Every week, Nigel, for I think 3-4 weeks, once, twice a day, I had a message on my my answering machine didn't have cell phones. And this soft voice. Oh, hi, Dr. McNeel. This is Dr. Friedman. I'm just hoping that you're sometimes very soon going to have time in your busy schedule to come see me. Now, get it. I was eager to meet him. I've been enthralled by his work, by his writing. I agreed with it completely, but I was a very busy guy. Anyway, he kept at it every week, and finally, I called back and made time to see him on a Friday afternoon, so I could get my whole week of work in, and then I would go up and see him. Mind you, I had a couple of late patients scheduled for after I got back from San Francisco. So that's how I was interested. And then my first interview with him, it was pretty classic. I got there his secretary said, well, he's going to be about a half hour late. And I'm like, internally, I'm like, half hour late now. Okay. And I went, of course, I said, okay, that's fine. She said, would you mind waiting? I said, no, not at all. I probably said, no. And I sat down in that warm, cozy office on a November afternoon, cold and blustery outside, Friday afternoon. Nigel, do you have any idea what I was experiencing in life in those days on Friday afternoon after a week of work?
Exhaustion.
Bingo. So I promptly fell sound asleep, sitting right in front of Diane's desk. I was catty corner to her. So Dr. Friedman arrived. We went in. He came in and he introduced himself in his white coat, this diminutive man. He went in and had an interview. And I could tell he was really interested in what I was saying. So I tried to tell him as much about myself as I could in as short amount of time as I could. And if he seemed like he was getting a little bored, I just speeded up what I was saying. You see my head go like that? And so anyway, at the end of the interview, toward the interview, he said, Dr. McNeel, he said, you seem to have the qualities that we're looking for in a group therapist. He said, however, the men and women in these groups, he said, they will not abide a hypocrite. You cannot go in and teach these groups and teach these people how to amend their own type A behavior without amending your own. So let's pretend that this last hour, you've been teaching a group, and now you're going to use yourself as an example of pointing out to them all the type A behavior you demonstrated during this interview. Dr. McNeel, what would you say to them?
Beautiful.
I looked at him. I said, Dr. Friedman, I said, I was doing my best to be good and not show any type A behavior. And I tried to say a few things. I had no idea. And he finally said, well, Dr. McNeel, would you like me to tell you the type A behaviors you demonstrated while you were talking to me? And I'm pretty sure I said, yes. Like, since I didn't feel like it was okay to say I'd rather run from your office screaming, I said, sure. So he did. He was very gentle. He was very kind. He wasn't judgmental. He certainly wasn't irritated with me. He knew exactly what he was dealing with. And he rattled off about 10 behaviors. That I nodded my head during this session, that I blinked a lot, time urgency, that I had grimaced a few times when I was talking, that when he asked a question, I would just talk forever, and I talked rapidly. I mean, everything he said, I immediately recognized was true. And so he asked me, was there anything about the interview you didn't like or felt uncomfortable with? I said, Dr. Friedman, I said, that's a fascinating question. I said, there was one thing that I did find myself feeling irritated about. He said, oh my, he said, would you please tell me? I said, well, I felt myself feeling irritated at you because you speak so slowly. He broke into a smile. He said, really? I said, yeah, I wanted you to go faster. He said, isn't it wonderful? An old type A like me could irritate a young, hot type A like yourself. Would you mind repeating that story? I said, no, I wouldn't mind. He called Diane on his thing. I said, Diane, could you come in here? She did. She was standing at the door. She said, Dr. McNeel, would you tell her what you told me? So I did. And he looked up at her and he said, isn't that wonderful that I could irritate another type A by speaking slowly, that I've learned to speak slowly. A year later, Diane was at my house for a party. I said, do you remember the first time I came to the office? She said, John, not that many people have fallen asleep in front of my desk. I said, well, I still wasn't quite clear. I said, did you tell Dr. Friedman about that? She said, well, of course I did. I said, what did he? I thought he was going to say, boy, that Dr. McNeel is a pretty cool customer. For a big, tense interview, he could fall asleep. Crazy. She said, oh, I told him, he didn't say much. He said, that's just because Dr. McNeel lives a life where he exhausts himself all the time. And if he slows down for a minute, well, he falls asleep because he's exhausted. I went, oh, well, that was good for my ego. Thank you. That's how I got introduced. Dr. Friedman said, come back. He took me by the elbow. He had this way of touching people on the elbow.
Wow.
And it was very tender. He said, we're very interested in you. He said, please come back soon. I came back the next week. I found time in my busy schedule. And after about 5 minutes, he said, welcome to the Meyer Friedman Institute. Oh, the other thing I want to tell you that he said in that first interview, and be, I think, interesting for your viewers, is he said, Dr. McNeel, you seem to have the talents and the skills that we want. But there's something you need to understand about our work. We believe that our work succeeds in helping people modify their behavior and thereby give themselves protection from coronary heart disease. And the reason why it works is because our counselors care about the people in their charge. And you need to know something very clear. That if we find out at some point, if we hire you and we find out at some point that you're just picking up a paycheck, you're coming and you're giving lip service and teaching the classes, but that you're not deeply caring about each and every individual in your groups, Dr. McNeel, we will fire you. I went, oh my God, I found somebody who would fire me if I wasn't nurturing.
Wow.
And at that moment, I had the thought, I can remember having the thought, I would walk through a wall for you.
Wow. What an amazing cardiologist to have that knowledge, that knowing, and that heart,
Oh, and he transformed through his own work. His nickname as a young intern was Cannonball. and he suffered 2 heart attacks, had 2 open heart surgeries, was a smoker until his 50s. I mean, he knew what he was talking about. Someone said to him, and we'll get into this in a moment, he said, your books are so full of information. How did you come up with all of that information about type A's, particularly type A men, because that was most of heart patients then? He said, it was easy. He said, I took a little mirror, put it on the table in front of me, looked into it, and started to write. And he and I became friends. I mean, we were close friends for 10 years. And this book is actually kind of autobiographical.
Wow.
It's the story of his own transformation.
Wow. And so how many years, John, did you spend, in these groups, helping people and change their heart health and their relational and behavioral sort of health as well?
Well, I worked, I drew a paycheck for contract work with the Meyer Friedman Institute for about 15 years. And the focus of these groups, Nigel, was reducing the amount of type A behavior that someone had. Now, they had a way of doing an oral interview in person that was videotaped. And out of that half-hour interview, they could come up with a score for how much type A behavior you had. Okay? Now, let's might as well get to the heart of the thing. There are 2 elements, and only 2 elements to type A behavior. All right? And the phrase is type A behavior. Lots of people say type A personality. Well, nobody was ever born type A with type A behavior. And it even slips into Dr. Friedman's book one time. He says type A personality, but it's type A behavior. And it's 2 types of behavior. And behavior can be changed. Personality. You go to your 20th reunion, you go to your 40th reunion. Everybody looks different, but once you start talking to them, they're the same personalities. You're the same personality. Behavior can be changed. There are two behaviors. One having to do with what we call time urgency. Dr. Friedman was picking up, yes, yes, hurry up. I was cutting him off, interrupting him, trying to hurry his speech. He would be talking too slowly, and I'd listen to the tone of my voice. He'd be talking too slowly, and I go, trying to come on, hurry up, in traffic, come on, move, get out of my way. And you can see the animation in me when I just imitate this. Lots of, and these are all identifiable behaviors. In that regard, it's not theoretical. And the other set of behaviors have to do with what we call free-floating hostility. And it's a hostility we carry around with us as our number one tool in life for when we feel put down or insecure, and suddenly, boom, our hostility is there. And attacks of what we call attacks of outrage. Get caught in traffic jam. Beep, 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 beep. Why? Well, because it makes me feel better. It doesn't move my car any faster. It's like, I'm not powerless. By God, I'm honking my horn. Honey, why are you so upset? Because there's this damn traffic. That's why I'm so upset. Okay? So, and what they found, and this is all based on very good research, and they were medical. Dr. Friedman considered the diagnosis of type A behavior as a medical diagnosis. He was not interested in creating a new way of doing psychotherapy. He was a cardiologist. He was a cardiologist who made a very keen observation. Very much like Eric Berne, for those of you who know about transactional analysis. He was a keen observer and came up with the child ego state, where it was the beginning. His studies on intuition was the beginning of parent, adult, child. Been in front of everybody's face for centuries, but he named it. Dr. Friedman saw something that was pretty obvious, but was invisible. And what was obvious after all of his years of working with people, he had over 400 coronary patients who died early before their time. So he watched a lot of people die before their time. Widows would say, why did my husband have to die so early? He didn't have a good answer. And he noticed there was only one thing that connected all of his patients that he'd seen over all those years. Some smoked, some didn't. Some were overweight, some weren't. Some had terrible blood pressure, others had perfect blood pressure. Some had hypertension, others didn't. Some, as I already said, some were obese, some were skinny. All these things, some drank, some didn't drink. There was one thing that connected all of them, and that was how they behaved under stress. And it wasn't hard for them to feel stress. Getting caught in a traffic accident, a traffic jam, having to stand in a long line in a grocery store, not life-threatening things. And suddenly all of these exaggerated behaviors to stress emerged. And he made the connection. And he did it scientifically. Here again, it wasn't like, well, I think this is true. We've watched this. No, he showed that there was a connection between stress and cholesterol levels. Bunko. It was impeccable research. He took it to the American Heart Association to make a presentation about it the next year with his colleagues. He describes in his book, he thought he'd be carried out on their shoulders as a triumphant hero. He said it was the oddest presentation he ever gave in his life. He said they presented this with data showing how these two different groups of people, their cholesterol had gone out of sight during times of stress. Tax people, accountants, and during tax season, and colonels at an Army college in June when they were going to get their placements. A very stressful time. And in both cases, cholesterol went far way up. Once the stress was over, cholesterol came back down. He said it was the oddest conference I ever went to. He said at the end of the presentation, no one clapped, no one said anything. Everybody just got up and sort of quietly filed out of the room. It was very difficult.
Yeah.
for people in
Pioneer,
medical. Yeah.
pioneering way, John. Just
Mhm.
a medical doctor to be able to correlate the impact back then of stress on the heart.
Yeah. And what he found was, by being able to numerically measure how much type A behavior a person had, is that if a person was able to lower that score, and that's what we worked on in the groups, was teaching people about their type A behavior. And so they could eliminate the type A behavior. They had other ways to respond to stress, and their scores came down. And that it was correlated that as their scores came down, they had greater and greater protection from another heart attack. His first group of trainees, of research people, they all had a heart attack. And so it was before stents, it was before statin drugs, it was before commonplace bypass surgery. And so these people were unprotected. Their heart disease had not been corrected. And they were the most at risk for another heart attack. And he did a 4-year treatment program with them. And it was so successful that in the 3rd year, the American Heart Association said, you have to offer the treatment to the controls. Too many of them are dying. So, but that was his focus. I'm a psychologist. I learned a fair amount about coronary heart disease in all my years of sitting in at Mount Zion Hospital with him. But my focus, and the focus of my book, is that type A behavior not only can harm our health, it also harms our relationships, our ability to have a spiritual life, our ability to experience contentment in life. It damages our personalities over time. Thank goodness everybody who has type A behavior doesn't die of a heart attack. We'd have to step over the bodies on the street. I'd have been a goner. But over time, it will damage the personality. And after a while, when a person gets really old, well, you might say to somebody, he has a type A personality, because there's nothing left of the young person who once laughed and could joke and could enjoy a moment and enjoy a sunset and go to a play and have fun. That person, that person's pretty gone there. And their face.
Yeah, that aliveness is gone, John. And from your book, I learned that, and for the viewers out there, what we're talking about here with type A behavior is time urgency. We're always running or busied or hurried in some way that takes away from the beauty of the moment. And you're always in the future on some way trying to accumulate more things to do to get approval and recognition. And then on the other hand, you have free-floating hostility, which is irritation, agitation, anger, and impatience. Now, does any of you who are listening ever feel any of those sort of experiences? And John, I was sitting here today feeling into and another way to describe some of those characteristics, because they're all striving to do more things, to achieve more things, to get this approval that never really is digested. It never satiates that feeling inside. And I want to explore that feeling in a little bit. But firstly, this becoming Superman or superwoman in some regard, and it's behavioral. What happened or what didn't happen in the childhood that could have, created this survival strategy, we could say. But I'm curious about it. Like, what happened or what didn't happen that would create a male type behavior in the world today?
Great question.
It's probably a big question. Yeah.
Oh, it is. It is. And you're asking that question to a guy who can talk a lot. So let's see if I can stay focused. The one word answer to your question is insecurity. Now, all human beings are insecure. As Helen Keller once said, absolute security does not exist in nature. It's not there. You mentioned Superman. The conscious, unconscious drive of a type A man is to become Superman, where nothing can hurt me. where I am a person of steel, and that becomes the model for security. And what is lacking in the growing up experience of so many of of me and the other folks is that nobody normalized insecurity. Nobody said, of course you feel insecure, but that's not anything about you. Remember when we're small, we don't differentiate. We don't know that our alcoholic father is an alcoholic father, and that's why he screams at us. Our experience of the world is there must be something wrong with me because my father screams at me. There is no differentiation. So, and I'm intensely insecure and feeling the natural insecurity of life. I mean, I'm little, you know, surrounded in a world by giants. And if the giants aren't being tender and protective and talking to me and teaching me about life, then I make lots of assumptions like their behavior toward me must mean there's something wrong with me. And every time I feel insecure, it triggers the feeling that there's something wrong with me. And I start, and then I get a little older and I find some empowerment and I find out, oh, I feel pretty good if I excel in sports or I make a good grade or something else. And that's the beginning of, well, I'll do that all the time. And that's what I'll do. And so I try to be this new thing, who never makes a mistake, always please people, or always defy people, whatever it is. But of course, life is life, and I feel my insecurity. It drops me back into that. And insecurity, for a type B, insecurity is just a natural part of life. They never feel freaked out by it. They just know that it's part of life. They get caught in a traffic jam. They don't have to honk their horn. They just wait for the traffic jam to pass. Yeah, they're late for a meeting, so they feel insecure about that, but they remind themselves that nothing bad's going to happen. Drop back into that insecure place, and then one day, that young person growing up discovers anger, and they go to this angry state because they become, without realizing, they become their own little junkie. They can create, by being angry, adrenaline and norepinephrine, and that little combination together makes noradrenaline, and that is a heady mix. And if you're exhausted like I was on that Friday, when I went to see Dr. Friedman, I was exhausted. Well, it's hard to carry on the Superman state if you're exhausted. But if I'd gone home maybe and started a fight with my wife, I could have gotten myself a whole lot of adrenaline and noradrenaline, and I could have popped back up into that because it would have energized me, boosted me back up into the Superman state. So if there's three states, insecure, Superman, anger, well, which one of those three is the best to live from? You don't have another option. Well, you try as much as possible to stay in Superman. Of course, when you get knocked out of it, you feel like a horrible failure, and then you have this strong response. You try to go fast. You mentioned time urgency. It's trying to do more and more things in less and less time. It's kind of like the more numbers I can rack up. And it creates an idea of what, again, a secure person looks like. But it's actually an insecure person striving for an impossible goal, as opposed to what it actually means to be secure. And actually, and before you and I started, you used the word acceptance. And I said, oh, congratulations, Nigel, you said the magic word. Because I teach the skill of acceptance, that is to be able to accept reality, what is happening, as reality, and not take it personally. Doesn't mean you like being stuck in a traffic jam. It just means that you're protected from taking it personally and having to have an outbreak of rage in order to recover your sense of security, or what you think of security. Everybody else in the car is like, oh God, here goes Dad again. Please. Let's all go out to dinner tonight. God, I hope Dad doesn't blow up at the waiter. I hope everything's perfect so that Dad doesn't get upset. Talked to a woman one time, and she said she knew she had her room over the front porch, and she'd be up there studying after, and she said she could hear her father come across the front porch as he came home. And she knew by the way his footsteps fell on the porch, whether it be a good night to be with the family, or maybe she'd stay in her room.
John, just for our viewers here, just so that I want to frame what John's saying
Great.
here. So type A behavior is an affliction for the individual, but it also greatly impacts the people that who love him or the family around him or her. You know, it greatly impacts the siblings, the wife, the next door neighbors, the employees or peer. It's like everyone gets a piece of the action. You know?
You nailed it. One of the things we did early on in the research program, where we had a beginning and an end of these groups in 5 years, about the 7th or 8th session, we began to teach them how to drive their automobiles differently. And we began to teach them how to drive like a type B instead of a type A. And so we set up a number of rules. Common sense rules. Don't honk at anybody. Don't cuss anybody out. Don't run up on somebody's back bumper. Don't slow down in front of somebody who's crowding your bumper. Don't weave in and out of traffic. Stay out of the inside lane on the freeway, the struggle lane. You know, all these things. And then every week people came in and they reported on their behavior. And if they had an infraction, they had to roll a set of dice. And whatever number came up, 5 came up, and I would count from that person 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 around the group. And the 5th person would have to pay a $5 fine on behalf of the person who'd made the infraction. Because the type A comes in, he'll have a couple of $5 bills in his pocket and say, okay, I had 2 infractions, here's my money. No. Because it was a way of teaching that your type A behavior doesn't just harm you. Yeah. It harms other people. Oh God, Fred, I'm so sorry. I will be more careful about driving. It's like, it was very simple. It was a very profound teaching. And as you know, Nigel, I use the metaphor of smoking. Because smoking is like, so why do people do type A behavior? Why is it so hard for a man when his wife says, you're irritable all the time? Why don't you be more pleasant? Don't tell me I'm irritable. I'm not irritable at all. It's just if you wouldn't bug me about it all the time, I wouldn't be irritable. By the way, I just showed on my face a whole lot of type A sign. I think you can see it. Mm-hmm. Well, there are a number of reasons, because fundamentally, look, for all of you listening to this, if there's ever a behavior on someone else's part that truly baffles you, smoking cigarettes is a good example. If you're not a smoker, smoking a cigarette baffles you. Why would somebody do something that's like that? You know, it stinks, bad for you, all this stuff. Makes your teeth ugly. Well, look for the theme of comfort. How does it comfort the person? You see somebody going nuts, beating on their steering wheel. Why are they doing that? Well, because oddly enough, it comforts them. Comforts them. Type A behavior comforts people. That's really odd. This is really comforting to me. But there's something about doing this and different, and I'm getting an adrenaline jolt that says, by God, I'm not helpless. It's actually comforting to me. I don't look very comforted, do I? But it's actually comforting for me. Okay? 2, it's uncomfortable, discomforting to the people around you. Cigarette smoke. 3, over time, if it's uninterrupted, if it's not modified, it will do damage, either to you spiritually, personality, or physically, or to relationships. You know, type Bs don't get divorced, Nigel. By and large, they don't get divorced. They have a way of accepting and dealing with life that they don't have to abandon someone or stomp off in anger. It goes against the dictates of common sense. Someone asked Dr. Friedman one time, I love this quote, and excuse me, it's going to involve a little profanity, so please pardon me for that. But someone watched his group or read his book, but they said to him, Dr. Friedman, do you teach anything in your program besides common sense? He said, not a goddamn thing. That's it. That's all I teach. Common sense. Give people rules and directives. They're all common sense. And the fifth thing is that to understand that these behaviors got created at a time in life when we had a developing brain, but we didn't have that part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex starts to develop at 7 or 8. For males, it finishes completion sometimes in the late 20s, sometimes not at all. But but sometimes I wonder about my own. But it's like my wife, honey, do I have a prefrontal cortex yet? Okay. But these strategies were created before we could see life in a larger perspective. And so that these coping behaviors are flawed. Type A behavior is flawed, not because there wasn't a pretty good reason for creating it originally. It was a pretty good coping strategy. It gave us power in situations where we didn't feel empowered. But today, it's like beating on a steering wheel and yelling at the traffic. It's really not. It's all 5 of those. And understanding that I came up with that behavior before I had the most important part of my brain, which is my prefrontal cortex, which allows me to see things in context and in perspective.
Yeah, so it's like this young part of you, John, almost like a child part that has a sort of narrowed view of the self and the world that made that decision that still carries on in adulthood. It was ingenious back then to some degree, and now adult, by golly, it holds you back from life and nourishment and connection and intimacy and empathy and all those yummy things that are possibly the medicine for type A behavior.
That's right. That's right. And perspective. We teach people. You mentioned the 4 A's: anger, irritation, aggravation, and impatience. Well, we help people turn that into ASAS, the acceptance of the trivial errors of other people and ourselves. The trivial is anything we won't remember 5 years from now. That's a game changer.
Say that again for our viewers, John.
I kind of hurried up.
It's a big one. It's
huge. So ASAS. The first A is the acceptance of the trivial errors of oneself and other people. And then we say, you're not to get upset about anything you won't. And then they say, well, I don't get upset about trivial things. I get upset about important stuff like, the political party I don't like. Well, that has a kind of importance. But here's the definition that we give of trivial. And for all of you who are listening, this is important, okay? Trivial. Look at my head come forward. But I'm emphasizing a point. I'm not being time urgent. Trivial is anything we won't remember 5 years from now. The guy said, 5 years? I blew up about something 2 weeks ago. I can't remember what it was. Exactly. Second S, the first S, the second letter, self-esteem based on something that doesn't move. Something that's a foundation as opposed to my self goes up, it goes down, it goes up, goes down, like the stock market. That's a misunderstanding of self-esteem. 3, the acceptance of affection. Remember, my Superman striving is to become the best and have the most and be comparable, superior in a superior way to all other human beings. That really removes the possibility of the unconditional from my life because unknowingly I've devoted my entire life to the conditional. How many, how much more do I have than you? How much better I am than you? And the last letter is S, and that stands for serenity. And that means the ability to soothe ourselves in a better way than beating on the steering wheel or smoking a cigarette. Remember, those other things, they work. It's odd, but they work. It's just that they're against common sense. It's against common sense to be soothing yourself in some way that's going to rob you of your health, rob you of your love, rob you of your relationships someday.
Well, John, it sounds like that's the addiction, right? This is sort of addictive tendencies with the adrenaline in the system. And so let's say people are getting mainlined with adrenaline, norepinephrine, and the other option is to get mainlined by affection, connection, spaciousness, slowing down, being in the moment, being able to build closeness and togetherness with other people instead of competition and comparativeness. That sort of vibe is that what we're talking about here? Is that
Exactly right. And type A behavior, in brief, is an addiction to our own adrenaline.
wow?
Okay? And we have lots of ways to create. The interesting thing about each of the type A behaviors, and even a little bit when I was imitating them, okay, because my ancient brain doesn't know that I'm imitating, I would feel a little bit of adrenaline.
Yeah.
Each of the type A behaviors, there's 30 or a little bit more than 30, they trigger adrenaline. It's like when I'm talking to you, and suddenly Dr. Friedman told me I did that a couple of times. I had to take his word for it. But just that, but if you slow this down, if you freeze frame the picture, and the moment I did that, I would trigger adrenaline.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, look at that line. Boom, adrenaline. I guess I just got a little boost. You're talking.
When I stick out my chin there, John, and that's like I'm angry. I feel that I get an injection of something in my system.
You do.
Wow. So we need to pick a different drug then.
Well, yes, and so yeah, two sides of a coin. On this side of the coin is my type A behavior. If it's up, there's my free-floating hostility, there's my time urgency. The other side of the coin is love, affection. But you can't have both. It's like flipping a coin. It's either heads or tails. And it's learning how to have, for lack of a better phrase, free-floating affection for ourselves and for other people, as opposed to free-floating hostility. It's called free-floating because it's right there, just the moment we need it. I can summon it, boom, just like that, without even knowing I'm doing it. There's tons to this, and I don't know how much longer you want to continue here. We've been at it for a while.
Yeah, well, I just want to come in with a wonderful phrase that I can't remember. Maybe it's Dr. Friedman, but he talks about sweetness isn't the weakness and the sweetness of dependency in a way. And I think, that being, that sort of interdependent with someone. Can you share a little bit about how important that is for A-type, sort of viewers here, because there's a big majority of the world that are type A behavior, and this what does it mean, the sweetness of dependency?
Well, there are two important words you just said: sweetness and dependency. Yes, Dr. Friedman talked about the sweetness of dependency, the sweetness of being dependent on other people. And by the way, we're all dependent on other people. We're massively dependent, but there's a thing in the type A drive that says, "No, I made myself. I'm a self-made person." It's like, really? And so in the initial work in the research, I'm not going to go through all of them. There were seven belief changes that were important to. In my book, I put the 7 belief changes at the beginning of the book, and then I put them in the last chapter of the book. So after reading the book, you can see where you are in changing it, because these are 7 core beliefs that are false beliefs. That type A behavior had something to do with me being successful. Well, no, I became successful while having type A behavior, but I became successful in spite of having type A behavior. I was so talented, people were willing to put up with how irritating I was. And what I think it's belief change number 4 is that sweetness is not a weakness. Sweetness is not weakness. Because type A's men are terrified that somebody's going to say they're weak. I'm not weak. Who said that? And the sweetness of dependency. Well, and it might be a nice place for me to repeat the closing that we use at the groups, because this I can't cover, as Superman as I'd like to be, I can't cover everything there is to know that I've accumulated for the last 30 years and spent 400 pages talking about. But here's the closing that we use at the end of every type A group. And back in the days when we met in person, we stood around in a circle and held hands. And the closing goes like this. And it becomes more important over time. I've said it thousands of times. We are here because we realize we need more help than we can give ourselves. We need each other. So may all our efforts together be of benefit to each one. And may friendship, laughter, and love bring enrichment to our lives and to all whose lives are in our care. We acknowledge this gratefully. Amen.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it is. Written by Dr. Jim Gill, a Jesuit priest who was one of Dr. Friedman's major supporters, who taught Dr. Friedman about love, about the power of love. Dr. Friedman dedicated his second book to Dr. Gill for teaching us about the spiritual power of love, because when he started out, he was cannonball. He was interested in hard data, period. And the guy that I came to know, sorry about the glare.
Yeah, perfect.
Right. And by the way, his son sent me a picture of him in his lab, white lab, you can tell it's a lab. He did a lot of wet lab work, and in his lab coat, and I think he's got a pipe in his mouth. I couldn't recognize him. The only thing I could recognize in that earlier black and white picture is I could look in the eyes and see how incredibly smart he was. But the rest of the face, it was a stranger to me. It was not this guy right here.
Wow, the power of sweetness, the power of the heart, the power of love, and it was great to hear that, to hear how Dr. Friedman got impacted by the Jesuit priest in a way that helped him soften and come down from here into those incredibly important 14 inches into the heart, and that journey, and how that really helped shape his work and impacted your life, John, and it's impacted my life, because I'm in just great admiration of the work you do, and I hope to do 10% of what you do in my life. I'd be terribly grateful.
You're going to do it. You're going to do 100% of what's on your mountain. It's not going to have anything to do with my mountain.
Yeah, but I learned a few things from your mountain.
That's right. My first big teacher, Bob Gould, people used to say, "Oh, we want to be as good as you, Bob." He said, "Get the hell off my mountain. You can't be as good as me on my mountain." So go climb your own damn mountain.
Get up your mountain there. Well, thank you for giving me the footing here, John, to get some solid ground beneath me with this work, and for the viewers out there who struggle with being angry all the time with their spouse, by always feeling impatient around their children, of always being agitated at work. And there is a way, and I suppose the heart is the way. And if you're interested or struggling and you would like to find that way, then you could reach out to John on his website. You can connect us here at Wellbeings, and we would love to give you any resources, therapeutically speaking, whether individually or in a group sort of dynamic. But the main thing here is, if you got something from this, know that there is a way, and the way is connection, affection, empathy, intimacy, love. And what a lovely way to end. You took the words out of my mouth, John. I wanted to end with that prayer, but you did it. You got there before me.
I want to say one more word to all of your viewers, which is that my entire book is on my website.
Wow.
It's free. Yeah, I prefer paper books, and so I like to hold something, and it's easier for me. But if you can stand looking at the computer that long, it's there. And of course, you can download and print it if you want, but it's there. Wow. It was given to me, and
that's beautiful, John. And just one more word on your book, Aspiring to Kindness. We're talking about love, affection, and empathy as the cure. Is that where the title came from, Aspiring to Kindness? Where did you come from? I'm just curious. I always love to know where the wellspring of where that name came from, or how you got to it.
Well, I went through about 15 titles, and I don't remember how I happened on that one. But we all aspire to something. Like I say, type A is consciously, unconsciously. They aspire to being a super person, that just where life can't hurt them and can't hurt the people around them, and where they're in control of everything. That's an aspiration. It's an aspiration that'll put unfortunate lines on your face by the time you're an old person. So I'm suggesting people to aspire to kindness.
Well, John, it's so strange because on my wedding day, I turned to an elderly couple who were in the 80s, late 80s, who were very eccentric and colorful and alive in their marriage. And I turned to them and I says, "Can you give me some tips on how to be, how to do this thing called marriage?" And they looked at each other and they said the same thing. They said, "The secret is kindness." And when I saw the title of your book, it was so auspicious for me personally, because on my wedding day, that was the aspiration or the inspiration to attain aliveness in someone's life, is to aspire to be kind to themselves and to other people. And I think it's a phenomenal title. And for anybody watching, it's a phenomenal book. And John's even saying it's for free on his website for those who don't want a solid paper copy. So John, thank you for your heart, and thank you everybody who's watching. If you got something from this, please hit a little like or a share or subscribe, or just simply watch it again and share it with somebody who you might feel that is type A, who may not want to watch it, but you could at least share it with them anyway. And reach out if you need help. John, thank you again for taking time out of your day. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
See you everybody. See you same time next week.